Hi and welcome to part 3 of the Key Theorist. So I did promise that I was going to do all three. You could revise over Christmas with all three. So here is the last section now. What I would like you to be doing is completing a little bit of a write-up from YouTube video number 1 and YouTube video number 2 and documenting all the key terms that I've now covered. So as you can see, we have covered on video number 1 and 2, intellectual development, emotional development, and number 5 and 6 on the nature versus nurture. Today, I'm going to go over the stress diathesis model, Holmes and Rave's social readjustment scale, and the 2 theories of aging. Okay, so let's remind ourselves then. The stress diathesis psychological model helps us explain how stress caused by life events, which is our nature, can interact with an individual's genetic vulnerability, and this can then impact their mental well-being. According to this theory, some individuals are born with certain biological or genetic predisposition to a mental illness referred to as a diathesis. So many times now, I've spoke to you all in class and said at times people may go through a life event, which is their nature. So we've covered so many in class. We talked about things like going through GCSEs. We spoke about like driving. We spoke about traumatic events. And then we spoke about the individual's genetic vulnerability, which is the nature. So it's their mental well-being. In class, we've all agreed that not everyone will go through the same experiences, and if they do, not everyone will have a predisposition to a mental well-being illness. Okay, we've said so many times that some people may be able to cope with it, or some people might never go through that nature, might never go through that life event, and they might never ever know that they've got a genetic predisposition to a vulnerability. If they don't experience stress in their life or high levels of stress such as family conflict, abuse, trauma or problems at school, they might not know. However, if someone goes through these issues, which is your nature, your life event, this could interact their genetic vulnerability. So, a bit of a model to help you understand a little bit more. We've got our psychological disorder in the middle, okay? So we've got our individual, let's say. And then on the left-hand side, we've got our vulnerability. Our vulnerability may be because of a genetic inheritance. So we've said about depression. We've said, sometimes depression can be argued that it's genetically inherited from maybe parents, grandparents, etc. It could be certain biological processes such as brain abnormalities or what we've seen from our early learning experiences. So, how we've seen someone cope with issues before. Then on the right-hand side, we've got our environmental stresses. So depending on that stressor can have an effect on how that individual copes. So many times I've drew an individual. So I'll do my individual as I've done again. And this individual has gone through a life event, okay? The life event that they've gone through is trauma. So I'll put a T here for trauma, okay? So this is the nature side of it. So this is our nature. On this right-hand side, we've got our vulnerability. Now, luckily, this person has got no genetic inheritance, no biological processes, or never seen early learning experiences. Therefore, we can argue that they might not have a genetic vulnerability to this trauma, okay? So their ability to cope with it might be a little bit different. Let's start again with this individual, okay? So we've got a different individual now, and what they've gone through is, okay, a trauma. So we'll put trauma again. This is the nature, because this is the life event that's happening. On the right-hand side, we've got the vulnerability. This person is highly likely to gain depressive thoughts because family members have been through depressive situations and cope with them really, really badly. Therefore, we can argue that this genetic vulnerability may occur due to this environmental stressor because they are more prone to a genetic inheritance of depression. This is the way you can talk about the model. You can talk about it for a number of reasons, okay? In regards to stress again, we have also the Holmes and Ray social readjustment scale. Now, I think a lot of you will be able to remember this one a little bit more, but just in case we get asked about the stress diathesis model. Holmes and Ray believed there was 43 life events that an individual could go through, and each of those life events has a score. That score defines how stressed you were. So each individual who maybe went to see a psychologist, maybe went to get some information about why they were feeling stressed, and the psychologist would give them this and say, okay, mark this off in the last year and what events you've been through. Each life event is worth a score, and at the end you would total up your score. As you can see at the bottom, points mean a certain area, so 150 or less means relatively low, and then it gets higher and higher. We've talked about the critics of this, we've talked about the positives of this. We've also talked about why sometimes some of these issues may not be classed as a stressful life event and why they might be a positive. So let's recap now. Holmes and Ray developed a questionnaire called the Social Readjustment Scale, which identified major life events. There was 43. The higher the score, the more likely an individual was to become unwell. However, we argued in class especially that each individual is unique. Everyone deals with stress in a different way, and it affects it. Holmes and Ray assume that every stress would affect people in the same way. Critics of the theory stress that it's not necessarily true. For some people to have a breakdown of a relationship and getting divorced can be extremely stressful, yet for others it can be a relief. In addition to that, we also stated that smaller life events that we go through on a day-to-day basis, such as losing keys on a day, traffic jams, how we look, how we feel, these are referred to as daily hassles. However, these can have a long-lasting effect on an individual, more so than what one of those stresses could have. Okay, for the two models that we just spoke about, I would like you to make an overview of their key terms and how they link to health and social care settings. We've done so many questions on these now. What I'm going to talk to you now is about the two theories of aging. Okay, so we've looked at these in class now, and I said to you, if you've got any questions on late adulthood, make sure you are bringing these theories in. It's so important, okay? The first theory that we're going to look at is the social disengagement theory. So disengagement essentially means to withdraw from involvement, and in 1961, psychologists Cumming and Henry proposed that older people naturally withdraw from social involvement as they get older. They concluded that older people have restricted opportunities to interact with others, and Cumming 1963 further argued that older people experience reduced social contact, and this makes them become more individual and less concerned with expectations of others. She concluded that it is appropriate and healthy behaviour and that disengagement is a natural part of ageing. When we've spoken class and we've identified the different reasons why people disengage, we've come up with the following reasons. Technology is another one reason. Older people may not be able to adjust to technology as it changes. Geographical location, so individuals may live further away from family members. We've also stated that disabilities, physical disabilities, can make people naturally withdraw from society, and unable to access health and social care services or recreational centres. It was widely accepted in the past, okay? So individuals may take disengagement too far, which can then have longer lasting negative effects. Many researchers today do not agree with the disengagement theory, okay? Cumming and Henry first proposed the theory in 1961 when there's no internet, no mobile phones, no text messaging, okay? Many people at that time would have no access to a car, so this can be the critics of the theory then. We can now argue that people might have more access to car. We can argue that people have got access to bus passes. You know, it's £10 a year for an elderly person to have a bus pass and they can use it all year long. Although we argue that some elderly people can't use technology, we can't be prejudiced and say that that's the case for all elderly people. Some people may be able to use it. Then we've got the activity theory. The activity theory was proposed by Robert Habermas in the 1960s, so again, both quite similar to Hammond's, and his theory is based on the assumption that the social and psychological needs of older people remain the same. So you've probably heard a lot of older people saying they feel younger than the actual age that they are, and what Robert Habermas wanted to do was to make sure that their life didn't decline, they didn't isolate themselves. He recognised that this may involve adjusting to changes in health or mobility, but people need to be satisfied by taking on new roles from retirement. So joining social groups, learning new skills, taking part in charities, etc. Many older people look forward to retirement and view this part of their lifespan as an opportunity to pursue new hobbies. So the activity theory basically says, whatever you want to do when you retire, adapt that and make sure you're pushing yourself to do so. And by doing this, it reduces the risk of illness and increases lifespan. One theory is that older people need to engage in telling their life story, and this allows people to develop in their self-esteem. In addition, Coleman, 1994, argued and agreed with this, and that reminisce therapy can be useful for individuals. So thinking about what they've done in their life and reminiscing on it and keeping active can be a massive positive to these individuals. Okay, exam question now. So if you want to have a little go with this, pause the screen. Answers that you could have potentially used. Okay, you've now had all the theories, all three are on YouTube videos, and it's important that you keep revising these, please. Any questions you've got, please let me know and we can discuss further.